And kind of circling back to the earlier question that I asked regarding where did masculinity go? What happened to masculinity? This has just been a thought of mine that I think pornography put a really big dent into masculinity. What are your thoughts? How do you think, if you think this, pornography affected men and manhood?
In like the most profound way possible. So I think in many ways, a society is successful to the extent to which it can put sex on the other side of developing yourself in a positive way. Like that's how societies become successful. They say, hey, you get to have sex, reproduce, have a family, have this kind of status if you abide by these very important rules and you create this level of, productivity and usefulness with yourself. And today we don't have that. It's like, you don't need to be a good guy. You don't need to be respectable. You don't need to be a provider. You don't need to do any of these things to get your nut. You have infinite realms of sexual possibility through this virtual world. And because of that, one of the major fundamental motivations for masculine development then is completely wiped out.
Yeah.
And so I think it's absolutely staggering, probably the impact that it's had on men. Like men have never had more opportunity to do incredible things because of technology and our modern societies and things like that. But what do? They jerk off and they play video games.
Right.
And I've spent years and thousands of hours into that kind of stuff. So I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, what a waste. What a waste.
Right.
And this is where it's like being, I think maybe for first time in history, like in mass, it's really voluntary whether you want to be a real man or not. And in the past, like as conditions get harsher, your choice on that matter becomes smaller and smaller.
Right.
It's like either be a man or fail.
Yeah.
It was like die or not reproduce or whatever.
Yeah.
And now there's a choice there. And so this is part of that evolution of masculinity that I was talking about.
Yeah. And so I want to entertain another idea relating to choices. And this is just how I kind of perceive things, but it's become so easy to be hooked on to these short-term highs. We're going to talk about NoFap, but we're still talking about drinking, drugs, all that stuff. And even with pornography, it's so easy for people to decide like, oh, I'd rather just look at pornography instead of actually being and doing something productive with my life. Now, if you're familiar with yourbrainonporn.com, which I'm sure you are, I think they used to have a headline that said that pornography evolved faster than our brains evolved. Essentially that porn existed in a way that we weren't ready to keep up with. And so my concern is for the younger generation who don't have the same choices that we did. You and I, we weren't exposed to it when we were like 10. I mean,
Right.
We had pornography magazines, but we didn't have porn in the way it exists now when we were younger. And so I think that what's happening these days is that porn, it's easy, it's fun, and it keeps you happy to an extent. But also what's happening is it's enabling men to disable themselves. And so how do you feel like that relates to masculinity, if it does at all, and what do you think that's going to do for men of the future?
Well, I mean, if nothing's done, then, I mean, the decline of men, I believe, will just continue. And also just society is going to fall too, because, you're going to destroy the family unit. Like, the big thing I see is that, at the center of society, you've got the family, right? And at the center of the family, you've got the husband and the wife. And at the center of that, you've got sexuality. And so if the masculine sexuality keeps getting funneled figuratively and literally into the sewer with porn, then the whole thing is going to keep collapsing. But I think in terms of if we do something about it, and you're talking about your brain on porn saying how porn evolved, it came about faster than we could, evolutionarily adapt to it. Well, that's where society steps in. Society is kind of the intermediary between, this instinctual biological self and the one that actually has to function in the world. And if we can develop the proper socialization mechanisms where we can internalize in our social structure that, hey, this thing is not good, then I think we're going to be fine. We've done that to an extent with drugs. People there's still plenty of people who do drugs, but we're also educated about how, this will screw you up. Primarily, like a lot of successful people, if they do them, it's, they're very kind of careful about it. They recognize the dangers that are there, but we don't really have that awareness yet around pornography. And I think that, through the conversations like what we're having here, that is something that will hopefully be developed. And honestly, I see it being one of those kind of determining factors in the future, especially as porn gets more sophisticated. Like, they got VR now. You just, stick your dick in a joystick, and like, you're gonna have kids who never leave their basements. Right. And so, it's just gonna become more and more obvious that this is the path forward. And so I think as people embrace that, there's gonna be almost like a divide in men. It's like the guys who are caught in it and the guys who are free from it. And it's kind of scary, but I have hope.
There's like the comment I hate the most, and I'm sure you've gotten it or you've seen it, is that there's no science behind NoFap. It's not real. This is all placebo. And a couple of responses that I have is, A, if it were placebo, so what? It works. That's what placebo is. Placebo is supposed to be something that your mind fills in the gaps and fixes your problems, more or less. Well, the problem that I keep seeing again is people kind of refuting it, saying that it's not scientific, it's not backed up by anything. But the way I kind of view it is we are our own scientific experiment. I can look at my life, I can see I can see the changes very clearly. Post NoFap, what was I doing? I was in a very toxic relationship. I was at a very toxic workplace, and I was compliant with all that. I accepted that to be my reality. And I think that's what people don't understand. The ones that are in this state of mind that, oh, porn is natural, porn is fine, I think those are the people that are still trapped in that mentality that it's okay. This is just how my life is. And I want those people, those are the ones that I want to at least experiment for themselves. It's not until I experience it for myself that I was able to see, wow, this was actually a big deal. This was a problem. Another thing that sticks out of my mind, or in my mind, from the Your Brain on Porn website used to be a bowl of water and a fish. And the fish was asking, what's water? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where a lot of these guys that are still refuting NoFap are at. They're not seeing the problem. And my one answer to them is like, just try it out for yourself. If anything, if you could even go 30 days.
Sure.
I would like to see that happen.
Yeah.
Because now we're talking about something else. We're talking about willpower in that sense, or self-control. And I don't think a lot of people have that.
Sure.
And I don't know your personal experience with it, but what were your biggest challenges, I guess, initially kind of getting over the whole hump of pornography and all that toxic stuff?
Well, before I say that, just like one comment, it's super scientific at this point, or at least there is a very strong scientific case. And I just want to throw that out there. Like, the number of studies that have proven that porn affects the brain almost identically to drugs.
Exactly.
They're out there now. You guys can you can very easily look that stuff up. Go to yourbrainonporn.com if you want to. Actually, they're really good on the science. They're like on their stuff there. So definitely check that out. nofap.com has some of it too. So, and then your question was, how did I get over the initial hump?
Like, what were your biggest challenges that you faced? Were you also, I want to know, were you a naysayer at first? Or did you even know that it was a problem to begin with?
I actually was trying to quit porn and masturbation for a while before I actually found NoFap. I thought it was just kind of like my problem. I didn't know that other people struggled with it. And honestly, once I found NoFap and found that people are doing this by the thousands, and that there was like all this science out there, like that, was really helpful for me to understand. I had done most of the work at that point to where it was like I had like one 16-day streak, and then now I'm still on that streak.
Right.
So it was like I was like ready to go. I just missed. I guess the last pieces for me were the community and the science, and that kind of put it all together to give me the mindset that I needed.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think it's it's still sensitive for some people. It's still a sensitive topic. Bringing it up in public, I think I'm super open to talk about it with people, but I think it's still something that needs to be brought to people's awareness. People, when you don't know something's a problem, I think that's when it becomes the most dangerous. When it's something that's affecting you and you can't really see it. And so I think my objective with my videos in general has always been, I started the channel to help people get out of that hump. But then it's like, okay, cool, we've moved beyond pornography, but like my life is still mediocre. Like I'm still in this pit of despair. What's going on? The amount of emails that I get that say, oh my God, Seth, I've done NoFap for 60 days and my life still sucks, or I haven't got a girlfriend yet, or XYZ.
Right.
My major focus on my channel has shifted. To me, not only did I get tired of hearing my own voice about NoFap, but it's like you need to do more than just pull back from pornography. Now, like I think you said earlier, either on or off camera, where that's the start. Moving beyond pornography is the start, but now it's about what you're willing to do with all that information, that new found self that you have. And I think that's where most guys are going wrong. I think it's always about developing the lifestyle versus just removing the problem. Is this something you disagree with,
absolutely.
or can add to?
Yeah, hands down. I mean, the only way to quit porn is by putting your energy elsewhere. You can't just, if you just cut porn out, that creates like an energetic vacuum. And that vacuum is going to get filled one way or another. And if you don't fill it consciously, then you'll fill it unconsciously, which often usually means a relapse, or it'll get filled by another addiction, or you'll just have this pit of despair, like you said.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to do something else. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is where the concept of, like, I think sexual transmutation is very powerful, which is the idea that instead of making love to your hand, make love to life. Right? Like your sexual energy is your creative kind of force. And find something to put it into. And if you're not creating something, you're not creating new life, new opportunities, new skills, new abilities, new whatever, then you're in death mode. And that's a terrible way to live. So, live more, I would say, is the answer. Live more, live better. And that's what's going to make you happy.
Right.
Like there is this idea that quitting porn, it is this kind of magical thing where, you'll get these crazy superpowers and, women will come over and slap you on the butt because you're so hot now. Like, no, that's not true at all. I mean, well, there is some truth. There's some truth to it in the sense that like quitting porn can change, the way that you show up and whatever, which can cause these things. But like it comes down to, all right, now you just actually got rid of an addiction that was swallowing up all your energy and self-confidence and all these kinds of things. So now you can actually go out and do the things that you want to do. So yeah, that's the superpower, is that you will regain the ability to self-motivate. And that was my biggest shift, because I sucked at self-motivation. I couldn't get myself to do anything unless it like offered me a huge dopamine high.
Sure.
And that was like a prison. It was a prison of comfort. And quitting porn will let you break free from that.
Yeah, totally. And so on the topic of habits, to me, nothing more, I think pornography is nothing more than just a really exaggerated habit. I think people are doing it almost subconsciously at this point. I'm reading personally on some books that kind of talk about how the action of doing something is what sends the signals to the nervous system, and you just get looped in this cycle. And I think that honestly, I think the further you go away from any habit, I mean, we can talk about drugs, we can talk about any bad habit, but I think that the further you go away, I think Anthony Robbins illustrated this, is that the neuroassociations associated with the habit start to weaken. And I think that if people could only get themselves to distance themselves just for it long enough, it's not like it's going to radically change your life if you go for 30 days, but if you can just keep on distancing yourself from that, then now you started a new habit of not masturbating, if that makes sense. So I think that, to sum all that up, what I'm saying is I think that pornography is nothing more than a really bad habit, but also not masturbating is a new habit to kind of be formed. You kind of see that idea I'm kind of going with?
Yeah, I would say porn use is more than just a bad habit, but
yes, right.
Mostly because of like what it does to your perception of yourself and that kind of stuff, which we could talk about if you'd like. But yeah, I mean, if you want to look at it in terms of practical, like, practical neuroscience, like it's like, yeah, you got to let these old pathways kind of shrivel up. They don't really disappear, but you're building new pathways on top of them. And so, yeah, it takes work. Like the image I use with my clients who are kind of frustrated with this, it's like, imagine that you've got this trail through the woods and you've walked this trail 1,000 times, and so the path is real beaten down and smooth and whatever. If you try to deviate from that path, you got to go through all this dense brush and undergrowth and that kind of thing. It's like you got to beat down that new path, and eventually that old one's going to get overgrown, but it's not something that's going to happen immediately.
Yeah, totally. And let's talk about relationships and nofap.
Okay.
I'll just take this from personal experience. Number one, the best relationship is obviously the relationship that you have with yourself. And I think that is the one shift that I think really I gained from nofap, was learning to love and appreciate myself, asking myself, if I did love myself, would I be indulging in such habits like drinking, like fapping, would I be doing those things? And the answer undoubtedly is no. But romantic relationships is another thing. When I abstained from pornography and when I finally got it out of my system, what I noticed was a shift in the types of women that I was even dating in the first place. Abstaining from pornography helped me to create a newfound respect for myself and for women. So that my relationships, you would see, if you compared older girlfriends to later girlfriends, you would see a difference in who that individual was. And so, speaking on relationships, how did nofap or the idea of nofap affect you in your relationship? You're married, so how did it affect you? Was your wife there to support you? Did she know about it?
Yeah, so I didn't tell her until I was pretty far into it, and we weren't married at the time. We were, just about to, I think, just before we got engaged, and it was very hard. It was very, very hard because she's a sensitive girl, and it made her feel terrible, especially because I had specifically lied about it for years at that point. And it was very rough. And this is what I tell guys, is that you have to be able to weather the storm of your relationship if you want to make it work. If that's the kind of girl you have. Some guys have significant others who are very supportive and things like that. But some don't, and that's okay. You can still make it through, and they will forgive you as long as you really are doing it. As long as you back your talk up and you make it happen, you can make it work. So, yeah, it's tremendous. I don't know how you could possibly have a healthy relationship if you are heavily using porn, because first of all, with another person, but most of all with yourself. Right. Because here's the thing that was a big eye opener for me, was realizing that whenever you objectify someone else, especially heavily in the way that you do with porn, you're really objectifying yourself. And here's what I mean. It sounds kind of like a trite sort of point, but it's actually pretty, I think, profound, is that the reason why you're looking through thousands of thumbnails to try and find that hot girl is because your mind has associated a certain kind of status with a certain shaped body, okay? And you say, oh, that status, that's what determines that value, and I need to get that. And ultimately what your mind's looking for is it's looking for a trophy that it can pretend, that it can unite with, so that you can feel good, okay? And as you keep living that subconsciously, what you're training your brain to think is that without a certain kind of trophy, I can't have this peace, I can't have this release, I can't have this fulfillment that the orgasm kind of mechanically induces in you. And so what that does is you turn yourself into this object that is only as good as your accessories. Accessories meaning, how much sex you have, how hot your girlfriend is, how much money you have. And so by objectifying another person, you're just practicing self-objectification. And if you want to learn how to really like who you are and shine as the person that you're meant to be, then, it's got to be a holistic shift away from this, objectification kind of culture. Yeah, so it's the objection of yourself is what's taking place more than it is objectifying women, which I think is a perspective I've actually never thought about, and I think it makes perfect sense. And then kind of circling back to relationships, to the guys who are in relationships, and still indulging in pornography, for me, I always lead my life asking the question, how would I feel? And I don't think this is something guys truly understand. I think guys are really good at having that double standard. How many guys, myself included, would be pissed off to see their girlfriend spending time, hours a day or an hour or more a day, giving her attention to someone else who looks better than you or who can have a larger, than you, I don't think guys really understand that that is hurtful to women. I would feel very, very upset if that were what my wife were doing.
you know. And I think that that's something that guys need to take into consideration, that it's not just about how you're impacting yourself, but also how you're impacting the woman around you.
Sure.
I would be a very, very bitter individual if I knew that my spouse were giving all of her attention to this pixelated image, some guy that looks better than me, that makes me feel bad about myself. And so, you know, when I think of the whole NoFap, the world of NoFap, you know, I'm trying to look at it from all the different sides, and not just about what benefits I can get, not about just what I can do, what NoFap can do for me, but how can it help the people around you? You know, how can it help the people that are directly related to you? You know, I think through NoFap, although it started off on a self journey for myself, what's really the biggest prize is how it's impacted other people out there. And I'm sure the same for you. You can now look at all the men that you have actually helped change their lives. You know, I think those are the most fulfilling emails to read, saying that, hey, my life has been changed because of you. And it's like, you know what? Yes, NoFap was always about me, but now I can say to myself, okay, I've done some good for this world and helping mankind. And, you know, I think that the people that are out there who are afraid to talk about it, you know, I think it's important to speak up, to voice your opinion, because you never know who is out there who could really benefit from hearing your perspective. So this whole world of NoFap, I think it's just been a blessing to many people's lives, honestly, and myself included. And again, you are the reason that I'm here. You know, your videos were the first ones that I, more or less, you know, your videos were the first videos that I watched. And I think, again, just having more men out there to kind of speak up about it. You know, I've gotten backlash in my life for speaking about this publicly, but it's looking beyond myself and seeing what I'm doing for society as a whole. And so any other things about NoFap that we want to talk about? I mean, I think we've covered a lot, and you've really given some insight that I think people can look back on. And
yeah, I would say just one last thing is that the big obstacle for someone who's really trying to leave this stuff behind is the sensation of loss. It's this idea of like, well, if I give up porn and masturbation, then I'm never going to be able to have this, you know, freaky fantasy sex that I really want. Right. You know, maybe my wife isn't, you know, she doesn't look like a porn star, or maybe I don't even have a girlfriend. I don't know if I'm going to get one. Right. And it's like, at the end of the day, you have to decide that being someone that you like and admire is more important than getting pleasure. And when you can own that, then, you know, you can focus on creating something special, because it's like, you know, how do you make something special? You make it rare. You make it, you know, sacred. You make it, you know, isolated in a sense. You don't abuse it. And so it's like, by pulling your sexuality out of these lesser forms that you don't care about, then that allows the places where you do invest it to really, really mean something. And so you have to look at it as a gain, not as a loss. And if you can really own that, then, you know, you can leave it behind.